participate remotely, which I think is great. Hopefully, depending upon our discussion today. Good evening, Councillor Goodhouse and Mayor Snyder.
Good evening.
We were just saying that Councillor Shaw is getting ready to getting her mind in the game of being at City Hall.
Wow, she's looking right in there.
If you're in a hybrid model, at least I can pretend I'm here tonight.
Happy Tuesday, everyone.
Hi, Steve.
City Manager Reimer, I'm on page 400 of the budget. Only 94 more pages to go.
Well done.
Liz, do you have a tracker online where we can watch your progress, like the Santa trackers?
I did read the TCDA budget, so I have that done. So I'm in the appendix and the all that stuff. So
hence the budget and brief. That's a little longer than last year.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, thanks for doing that. Mr. Nolap, how are things looking technology-wise?
I was just looking for her. She is not logged on yet. And Mr. Nolap, you'll let me know when we're ready to go. Okay. Hi, Youth Councillor Nog. Thanks for joining. All right, I will call this Tigard City Council meeting to order. Deputy Recorder Raimundo, roll call, please.
Council President Lube.
Here.
Councillor Shaw.
Here.
Mayor Snyder.
Here.
Youth Councillor Nog.
Here.
Councillor Goodhouse.
Here.
And Councillor Newton.
Here.
All right. Mr. Nolap, would you mind putting the flag up on the screen? I'm going to ask everyone to mute themselves and participate in the Pledge of Allegiance on their own. All right, thank you, Mr. Nolap. Councillor staff, any non-agenda items?
Nothing from us, Mayor.
Okay. Well, I'm going to move us on then to section 2 on the agenda, which is proclamations and recognitions. We have a proclamation for the week of April 17th to 23rd, the week that we're in, as Volunteer Appreciation Week, and we have a proclamation that we provided a number of days ago that I hope the entire council has seen. And I just want to recognize how critically important volunteers are both to the city and to hundreds of organizations throughout the city who depend on them to make our community a better place and to take care of people that are less able to take care of themselves or provide for themselves, among many other things that volunteers do. So I would ask for the council's support in designating and proclaiming April 17th to 23rd as Volunteer Appreciation Week. Is there a motion? Council President Loop.
I move to approve proclaiming April 17th through 23rd as Volunteer Appreciation Week.
Counselor Shaw.
Happy to second that motion unless Counselor Newton would like to.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All right, Counselor Shaw, did you want to, was your hand up for discussion? No, okay. City Recorder, please conduct a roll call vote, starting with Youth Counselor Nog for an advisory vote.
Youth Counselor Nog,
Yes.
Council President Lube,
Yes.
Counselor Shaw,
Yes.
Mayor Snyder,
Yes.
Counselor Goodhouse,
Yes.
and Counselor Newton.
Yes.
All right, motion passes unanimously, and we have proclaimed April 17th to 23rd as Volunteer Appreciation Week. And again, thank you to all the volunteers throughout the city and all the other organizations that you support. So thank you. Let's see, we'll move on to public comment. Anyone that wishes to call in tonight and make public comment, you can do so now. For general comments, phone number to call is 503-966-4101. Again, 503-966-4101. And with that, I'm going to move us on to follow up to previous public comment. Assistant City Manager Nyland.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Councilor. At the April 12th council meeting, we received one written public comment and we had one caller. Both were from the same individual who talked about potential code revisions about livestock and would like to be part of the solution. We responded and will provide updates to all those interested parties who have weighed in. So time for our fun fact. In this case, some inspiring moments. So between our bouts with snow and torrential rainfall, there were several milestones that occurred this week that are worth highlighting and celebrating. First, Jackie Robinson. So Jackie Robinson's legacy remains 75 years after breaking baseball color barriers. For those who might not know the importance of this legacy, Robinson was the first Black baseball player in Major League history. Donning a Dodgers uniform, he took the field under incredibly challenging circumstances and unimaginable pressure. Through his courage, his character, skill, and values, he brought well-needed change to the game and advanced the civil rights movement in our country. 75 years later, we are still seeing acts of bravery and courage and perhaps creating future legacies. So I say this because last week, Giants' Alyssa Nakin became the first woman to coach on field in a regular season Major League Baseball game. In the third inning of a game between the Padres and the Giants, Alyssa made history when she stepped in to fill the role of first base coach. So in tonight's report, I give nods to the Dodgers and the Giants. So for loyalty's sake, I've got to say this, go A's. So here's to being brave, courageous, and having more firsts. Here's to broadening access and advancing opportunities for all. Thank you. That is my report for tonight. Play ball.
Thank you, Assistant City Manager Nyland. Appreciate that. We'll move on to written public comment. Deputy Recorder Raimundo, I don't think we had any written comment that I saw. Did I miss something?
That's correct, Mayor. There were no any written public comment received by noon today.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to phone-in public comment. Mr. Nolip, do we have any callers in the queue? All right, thank you. We'll move on to item number 4, which is the Tuwalton Valley Fire and Rescue State of the District Report. City Manager Reimer, you're going to introduce.
Yes, very briefly. I see Kenny Fentress is on.
Yeah.
This is your annual report that TVF&R likes to provide to their cities, member cities, if you will. And so tonight I'm going to turn over to him and give you a chance to hear the report as well as ask any questions that you may have of them. So, Chief.
Yeah. Thank you and good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. As mentioned, my name is Kenny Frentress. I'm the Deputy Chief of Operations for Tuwalton Valley Fire and Rescue. So I oversee our operations, EMS, and training. And it's my honor to be here tonight to do our annual State of the District. I'd be happy to answer questions along the way, or if you'd like, we can just hold them till the end. So I'm going to give this a shot and see if I can remember how to share my screen. Okay. Okay. How is that looking for you guys?
We can see it well. Thank you.
Okay, great. Going to. So 2021, we had a very challenging year, as I can imagine many of you did as well. We continued to navigate our way through the global pandemic. We had a historic ice storm and a historic heat wave. We had ongoing wildfires that we've seen increase in frequency over the last couple of years. And I'm proud to report that our focuses remain strong and we've been able to maintain fast and effective emergency response to all of the communities that we serve, including Tigard. Staffing's been a challenge for us. We've had several of our firefighters and staff, day staff, that got hit with COVID, which also created, as you're well aware, I'm sure, isolation and quarantine. We had a very long injury and illness list, and then we had a lot of retirements over the course of the year. But we're very optimistic that this group, this is a picture that you see of our current firefighter academy, they will graduate and be hitting the streets in June. So that will be very helpful for our staffing. This is a group of 25 firefighters. And then we're going to follow that up with another academy, which will start in August. That's not normal for us to have 2 academies, but we are actually anticipating running 2 academies per year for the next several years, just to keep up with the amount of attrition that we have. About 38% of our managers and chiefs can retire in the next 5 years. So we're hyper focused on developing the next generation to step into critical leadership roles. On the picture on the left there, that's a picture of Captain Karen Biraker. She's our newly promoted captain down in the Charbonneau station, our newest station. And Karen is our first female captain. Nationally, only about 4% of career firefighters in the U.S. are female, and at Tuwalton Valley Fire and Rescue, we're at 7%. So we're doing well, but we can always do better. The middle picture there is a picture of our girls' fire camp that we've put on for several years in a row now, and that's one of our outreach programs, and we are hyper-focused on outreach and recruitment to continue to increase not only our gender, but our diversity and reflect the communities that we serve. And on the right, there is a picture of Gennaro Esparza. He's one of our station captains, and he helps with outreach with second language so we can connect with our diverse communities. This next year, we're going to focus on wildfire prevention, apartment landlord outreach, and care home engagement. And we returned finally after a long 2 years to normal operation mode on March 1st. And we're beginning to attend in-person events, as I imagine many of you are as well. And we are about to conduct a public attitude research to better understand and serve our community. In November, we passed our bond, which we're extremely grateful for the ongoing support from our communities. And we received the AAA bond rating from Moody. And we just recently sold our first round of bonds in March, and we got a $9 million bonus and a 1.49% borrowing rate, which we're extremely happy with. Investments from our bond will include replacement of response vehicles, fire station improvements at 10 of the 29 stations that we have, funding safety upgrades at our training center that's off of Tonquin Road there, just outside of Sherwood, and then purchasing land for future fire stations. This may look familiar to some of you. This is a graph that we show every year that has the data that occurred with all the emergency responses in the city of Tigard. So I'm just going to walk through and hit the highlights. This was for the entire year of 2021. There was 6,669 calls that occurred. If you look at kind of the upper left and then going across to the right, we break it down by call type, and you'll see that the highest percentage of call types is EMS. That's very consistent with what we see throughout all of the communities that we serve and nationally. Nationally, about 80% of all calls for 911 are EMS. Going down under incident subcategories, we further break that down to get a little more granular and really understand where our problems are so that we can help train to them and also buy the critical equipment that we need to navigate those. If you look in the very lower left, we get down to hours of the day, and you'll see that it is very typical that we'll see kind of a peak spike in the late afternoon hours into the early evening, and then it starts to taper off as you get later in the evening. And then across days of the week, we track that. Not a significant change from day to day in the city of Tigard. Trending out, you'll see calls for service throughout from 2017 to 21. And in most of our areas, we actually saw a little bit of a downtick in calls in 2020, and we believe that that was probably from a COVID effect. And then we have in the upper right is what we call a heat map, and where you see the very brilliant bright yellow color, that's where a density of calls are occurring. And typically that occurs in care homes, adult foster living centers that, have a high demand for 911. And then lastly, in the lower right-hand side, you'll see the top station responses that responded into Tigard, station 5150 and 35s. Okay. Sorry, my computer just locked up there for a minute. This is a picture of a new pilot program that we are underway with called CHARM, which is Community Health and Resource Management Program. This is really a program to put our high utilizers of 911 in the right lane of EMS care. And when you do that, that drives down the amount of times that they're accessing 911 by our heavy assets that are then in service for more critical calls. It's proven to be really successful, and we're excited about this program. Some other things that are occurring within EMS. We know that EMS needs to continue to improve and emerge with technologies and system integration, because as you saw, that's the highest percentage of our calls. The pandemic was challenging, and it was challenging on our system. We've been working with Washington County and the private ambulance provider and other fire departments to address system challenges related to transport reliability. And during February, we were in an emergency agreement, TVF&R was, so we could transport patients when the private provider was struggling with their staffing. We continue to learn lessons from past wildfires and are focusing on training blocks to continue to make improvements. We've actually got one, I believe, later this month up in the Chehalem Mountain, and that's part of a regional effort and collaboration with other agencies. We helped with the passage of Senate Bill 762 to increase mitigation in urban interface areas. And our very own Chief Hallman is serving on the Governor's Wildfire Response Council to determine how legislation and funding will support local efforts for homeowners and TVF&R to prevent and respond to wildfires. And as I mentioned earlier, we want to conduct outreach in new and different ways to more people in our community. And we started an interactive newsletter called Safety First, and this is a picture of that, highlighting seasonal safety information. We conducted several wildfire webinars to help homeowners prepare for emergencies in their area. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief. That was excellent.
Thank you.
Councillor Newton, you have some questions?
Well, a comment and then a question. I'm really happy to see, well, all over the state, the focus on wildfire prevention and just the depth that y'all are going to for, forest management and residential, helping with the residential customers too. So that's good to see. My question is, I was fortunate enough when I was employed by the city of Tigard to get to go to the community academy. And I assume with COVID, that's sort of, not, you haven't been able to do that. But I just wonder if that's something that you're going to be reopening folks to, because it was really valuable. I think electeds and also me as a staff person with the city of Tigard, it was really valuable for me too. So anyway, just was wondering if that's going to come back. Thanks.
Thank you for the question, and I'm glad to hear that you're a graduate of our academy. Absolutely, we are going to get that going again as soon as we safely can, and we find that to be extremely valuable. We learn a lot from the folks that go through it, and I think that they learn a lot, and it's proven to be very valuable, and we will absolutely continue that.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor. My mute button's a little slow tonight. And thank you, Chief Venters, for the report. Very much appreciated. Did I hear you correctly that 70% of the firefighters today are eligible for retirement? I have two questions for you, and that's the first.
Yeah, no, I think it was 38% of our managers and chiefs are eligible over the next 5 years.
Great, that makes me feel much better.
Yeah.
The second question is, you mentioned you have 2 academies per year now. Are you able to fill them? Do you have enough individuals who want to participate that you're able to fill them, so we're going to have a good supply of firefighters in the future?
Yeah, great question. So nationally, the numbers are down a little bit, and I think because there's so much competition right now. You could look, and there's more jobs in the fire service than I've ever seen in my career, and I've been in this for 27 and a half years. So, agencies are competing with one another for candidates. Another thing that we've seen is there's not as many paramedics because the paramedic schools weren't able to produce paramedics during COVID. So there's not quite the numbers that we've seen in the past, but we still have really good numbers, upwards of several hundred that apply for our firefighter position. So we've got healthy lists, and we're going to draw good candidates off of them for the foreseeable future.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll just say, having worked in the industry for a while, like, you're a premier agency, and even if you're going to be, sniping people from other departments if it comes to that, because you've got just a phenomenal organization and results, and very competitive pay and a desirable place to work. But I think it's a good question, and it's really interesting to hear your description of kind of the lay of the land on your recruiting and hiring. Council President Lube, and then I've got a question about the heat map at some point.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for the presentation. I think it's so important for our organizations to work in partnership together with serving our community. And so I have a question about the heat map too, but my first question is there anything you need from us, any way that we can continue to support TBF&R?
Well, that's a great question, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think the partnership has been fantastic. I think just the ongoing open lines of communication and partnership, we are going to rely on our cities very heavily if and when we ever have the big Cascadia event or any major, the ongoing annual windstorm or snowstorm. It's important for us to maintain alignment and open lines of communication so that when we do find ourselves, and we will again in those events, we can work together and coordinate our efforts. So that's really my ask.
Well, I think it's good to also share, as we're in the beginning stages of really truly planning for our community resiliency plan and emergency planning, that as a council, we're very serious. We take it very seriously, and we've charged the city with making sure we're ready to go. My question is in regards to the heat map. It actually looks like a lot of the heat is coming off of potentially 99 as well. And I was wondering if that's in result of potentially intersections where there's frequent car accidents.
Yeah, it's I would have to have the data in front of me. Like I said, it's most common to see that level with care homes, adult foster living, but we also see it at intersections. I know we had a significant issue at the 217 and 26 interchange. So it could be likely that that is, MVC area as well, just from the high utilization.
Thank you so much for your time tonight. Those are all my questions.
Thank you for your questions.
Well, we have the heat map up. Youth Councilor Nog, I'll let you go in a second. I just want to finish the heat map question. And it sounds like you, Chief, you may not have this data, and that is 99W that's lit up there. And I think you're right that the couple of yellow areas are probably, I'm having a little trouble with, well, one of them maybe, is this all city of Tigard, or does this include certain zip codes? Because some of that looks to me like it might be zip code 97224, but perhaps in King City, the lower yellow on the 99W corridor, or do you know how the data is broken out?
I believe it's city limits.
Okay, so that's interesting. The one yellow that's sort of smaller and in the lower right-hand corner, I was specifically curious to know, because I think if we looked at prior heat maps before the Bonaventure was built, that was not there. That's a newer facility that's close to my neighborhood, and I see your resources there a lot. And I was just curious if that's what that was. It also, I guess, could be Bonita Villa, possibly. But I was just curious what that lower right yellow, smaller heat area was. And then I think the rest of that in the lower part's all Summerfield, but in any event, I would be curious if you could get back to me. Just, I don't know, the whole council needs to know that, but just by email I'd be curious to know kind of what's in those three very significantly dense yellow areas.
Absolutely. I will be happy to get you that information. And I'd like to go back to your previous comments, if I can, for just a minute. Really appreciate that. And I agree. I feel very good about our organization and that we are a destination department. And it's pretty common for us to see firefighters leave their departments locally and nationally to come to Tuwalton Valley. So I just wanted to circle back and thank you for those comments.
You bet. Youth Councilor Nog?
Because drought season is slowly coming up, I was wondering if there was any advice that the city could use to be more resilient towards fires and droughts during the summer to help us prepare. Yeah,
fantastic question and very timely. In fact, I just saw a map from the Oregon State Fire Marshal's office, and we're in an extreme drought in many parts of the state of Oregon, and on the west side, much drier than we've ever been. So it's very critical that we all take this serious. And I think as individuals and as homeowners and renters and folks within the city, it's really about creating a defensible space and making sure that you give yourself the best opportunity to reduce the ignition sources. So, keeping trees away from the gutter line so that they're not overhanging onto a roof, and making sure that you have a green space so that you have a defensible space if and when a wildfire event were to occur. I think that's really the best thing that we can do as individuals and homeowners and folks that throughout the city. Great question.
All right, Councilor Goodhouse.
Yes, thank you. I was going to put a plug in too for the academy. Went through that a couple years ago, and it's a very fun, hands-on academy, as Councilor Newton said. So for those people that have the opportunity to do that, it's going to be really hands-on. It's not just going to be sitting behind a desk. You're going to be out there doing a lot of the activities. But I also wanted to thank TVFNR for really doing a lot of the clinics for the vaccine clinics. A lot of those were really held. Did a great job of out there, I think, at the Nike campus, of getting lots of people through and getting them vaccinated. It was a great process of going through in your vehicle, going through all the steps and getting it done quickly. So I wanted to thank you for that work and being effective in that area.
Thank you. We are extremely proud of that work. I'm almost hesitant to quote myself because I'm not sure, but I believe I heard it was upwards of 70,000 vaccinations that we gave during that time frame in multiple clinics, and it was a great partnership with the communities, and I think it made a big difference. So thanks for saying that. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, very efficient and very effective. I mean, next thing you know, you went through the whole little snake through there, and you signed this, and got jabbed and kept going. So great job, and thank you for everything you guys do.
Thank you.
All right, thanks again, Chief. I'm going to move us on to the next item on our agenda, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon and some follow-up.
Thank you so much. You bet. Thanks for having me. Have a great evening.
All right, we're going to move on to item number 5 on the agenda, which is an annual joint meeting with our library board. Welcome, library board members. And we've got our library director, Halstead Bernard, with us. You're going to start with a presentation?
Yes, I will. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council, fellow Tigard teammates, and members of the Tigard community. My name is Halstead Bernard. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the director of the Tigard Public Library. It's my pleasure and honor to be here with you tonight to introduce the Council's annual joint meeting with our library board. As we're now past the 2-year mark of the great pandemic pivot of library services, I can't keep leaning on the words unprecedented or extraordinary to describe our current moment. I'm even cringing a little about the word pivot. But our board members are eager to share with you how we are continuing to serve our community and how together we have found the silver linings of our darker days. At its National Volunteer Week, I'd like to take a moment to thank our library board. Our board members volunteer their time, their energy, and their enthusiasm to advise our teammates in the services we provide our community. Volunteering truly is empathy in action, and our board's empathy in action has been invaluable over the past year. So thank you all. With that said, I'll be here to answer your questions after our board's presentation concludes. So I'll hand it off to Mary Bogert, our library board chair.
Thank you, Halstead. Thank you once again, Council, for inviting us to present what has been happening at the library this past year. At this time, if my other library board members would like to go ahead and introduce themselves. Helen, do you want to start?
Hi, good evening. My name is Helen Allen. Thank you so much for having us this evening.
Hi, my name is Kate Ristaw. Good to see you tonight.
Hi, my name is Elena. Good to see you.
Hi, my name is Shirley Edwards. Good.
Hi, my name is Candace Coleman. Glad to be here tonight.
I think Alan is our last member.
And I'm here, Alan Smith.
Thank you. Well, we want to thank you for letting us have the opportunity to share with you what has been happening at the library in the past year. As we all know, the last 2 years have been a challenge for all. Tigard Public Library has been there to support everyone as a community hub for knowledge and enrichment where everyone is welcome. As a patron commented, I think it was last week during National Library Week, Tigard Library is as comfortable as a cat lying on your lap. Just perfect. I think that says an awful lot. The librarian staff have adapted and changed as needed, and the staff has supported our community and helped them connect in a variety of ways. Join us now for a visit to the library. And Candace is going to start us off on the outside of the library building.
Do we have our slideshow? I'm not able to see.
Do we have our slideshow?
Oh, here it comes. Excellent. Great. Well, we're going to start off our library review with a tour of activities taking place outside of the library. First up is our library front yard landscape installation. Our library landscaping team has put a lot of hard work and effort into creating this new space outside the library front entrance. We're excited to watch this space continue to grow and flourish throughout the year. It should be really fun to watch it develop. Next slide. Express Hold's pickup service was a fantastic way for library guests to access material during the beginning of the pandemic when the library was closed to the public. And it continues to be useful for so many of our visitors and is in place still so that people can pick up their library materials on hold if for any reason they're not able to come inside the library. Next slide. We found great creative ways to use space outside around the library. This is an example of a library story walk from last summer. It's just a fun way to engage families outside of the library as well as inside. So, next slide. Another addition to some of the outdoor activities around the library is this mobile museum tour. And in here, you'll notice a little special guest in the photos. That's our little lost bear. He lives at the library now. We're still looking for his home. So if you know anybody who's lost their little brown bear, he's hanging out at the library. He's featured a lot in our library social media and has become quite popular with the community. Next slide. Our Tigard Library Backyard project development is super exciting. The community was surveyed earlier this year with over 800 survey responses received. The high preference from our community was prioritizing nature throughout this development. Next steps include seeking funding for the project, and we're really excited to see where this project's going to go. Next slide, please. Now our teammate Kate's going to take us inside the library for a look around there.
Welcome back inside. We're back to a new normal. On March 19th, 698 people came through the door. That's the most that we've had in a while. Everyone's excited to be back in the library, including me. I'm very excited. You want to give me the next slide? So there's been quite a few changes around the place, including something called face-out shelvings, which helps people discover new books. And we'll get a few examples of that. But you can see everyone's back in and enjoying the space again. And one of the other things they're enjoying is the next slide, the Opportunity Cafe. So that's Israel Martinez officially opened his wrestling-themed cafe in 2021. It's El Quadrilatero. Thanks to the work of the city for making this happen and the work of the library for keeping this going. What's your favorite pastry? Have you stopped by for one? I'm going to bother you later about it when I can see your faces. So my son reports that the cafe is the best thing that the library has done in years. That's according to an 11-year-old, and he's there for the conchas. So they're really good, and we're happy to see that space filled again. Next slide. And this is one of the very amazing things that's happening, that's been happening this year. So Tigard Library and WCCLS, the Washington County Library Services, partnered with the Tigard Tuwalton School District to provide library cards for all students in kindergarten through 5th grade. And so it's this really great opportunity, but one of the coolest things is that 500 students have already used their new library cards. So we're already seeing those cards in action. Next slide. And here, as you come in, you're going to see a lot of our new displays. And you can see right on the left there, we see that face-out shelving. And the really great part about face-out shelving is you get to see the front cover. So it's a lot easier to like kind of browse and grab a book and see one that you like. If you walk by those 3 in the middle there, it's very, very likely that you're going to go home with a book. So don't linger too long unless you're ready for your workout. And next slide. Now we are just now getting back to the browsing paperback collection. So you don't have to have a library card to check out any of these books. The browsing paperbacks are free to pick up, peruse, enjoy, take home. And we're happy to have the paperback collection back in action. Next slide. This is also one of my favorite things and one of my favorite people conveniently. So that's Miss Holly, and this is the personal librarian. So if you need some help finding a list of titles, you just fill out this form online, and the librarians will send you a list of titles in your email. And so you can say something like, something we did last week, like Greek mythology, and they'll send you a whole big list of titles of books that you could go take a look at. Next slide. Which is very appropriate given the proclamation today. And since it's officially Volunteer Appreciation Week, let's give a special shout out to all of our volunteers. We're so happy to have them back in the library. Every month, volunteers serve an average of 1,200 hours of service a month. So that was our previous standard, and we're making our way back in as the volunteers make their way back into the library. Next slide. Yay! I get to yay because that's what Callie has you do. She's a very giving virtual story times and reading books, and it's a great opportunity for kids to hear books read by librarians and get that interaction. And it's something that was really successful during the pandemic, where we were not as open, and it still continues today. And it provides an essential public service to kids so they can stay safe and stay connected with the library. I really enjoyed hearing a lot of Kelly's virtual story times too. Next slide. So if you just want to get in and get out, there's new self-checkout machines that are very, very easy to use. And they're located in several spots in the front and along the sides of the library. And the librarians are always there to help. So if it's hard and you can't figure it out, they're there for backup. But we've learned how to use them very quickly. And one of the cool things is the receipts even include the amount you saved by going to the library. Next slide. So I'm going to turn this over to my comrade, Elena, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about the take-home options.
Yeah, the library's been very busy and coming up with new and creative take-home options I'm excited to share with you all about. Next slide. First, if you haven't checked out the Library of Things yet, highly recommend. There is a wonderful collection of toys and games and educational materials and like animal skeletons and things like that in the children's section of the Library of Things. There's also games, and upstairs in the adult, there's different crafting materials and different like tech stuff that you thought you might want to try, but maybe didn't want to invest the money, like test drive a hobby. A lot of great things available through the Library of Things. Next slide. Also, a family favorite of ours, take and make kits for children and adults, and some really creative and simple craft ideas that come with all the supplies that you need that you can just take and have a fun rainy day activity. Next slide. Also, the Borrow a Laptop program, where you can borrow a Chrome laptop and a Wi-Fi hotspot, and you can use the laptops in the library, anywhere you need to use tech. Next slide. Bookstack, similar to the private librarian option, where you can request a, my daughter was going through a unicorn phase and she wanted to read about unicorn and Paw Patrol, and just tell librarian books about unicorns and Paw Patrol, and they will collate and put together a wonderful book stack of books on whatever topic you might think, and even random tidbits of like early reader books on mythology and animals, and they're so creative. Librarians are so creative in putting together a book stack that will keep you entertained and enlightened. Next slide. Now I'd like to open it up if anyone has any questions.
All right, Council. Great and informative presentation. That was really interesting to see how things are progressing as we're emerging from the pandemic. So, Council questions. Councillor Shaw first, it looked like. You were muted, Councillor Shaw. You were off mute, and then it took you.
Okay.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, it seems to tech problems tonight. But thank you so much for that presentation. I love the interaction you each had too. That was lively, and so much the Tiger Library is doing is fantastic. And the take-home kits, keep it up. I think that's just wonderful. To Kate's question, Choco Flan, maybe not quite a pastry, but that's amazing, and Tres Leches. So yes, keep going. And really just wanted to say thank you so much. And if there's anything you would request of us from the council that we can assist with, whether it's donations or funding requests, but if you have any thoughts for us.
Anyone on the library board want to respond to that?
I think I'll take that response. That you know, the library is always interested in more funding, and especially as we're reworking the collections, and also a lot of really good work is happening with the space itself. And so I'll leave that question for what that looks like to Halstead, who infinitely knows more. But I know that one of my favorite things over the last few years is seeing, you know, the Opportunity Cafe come back in, seeing the backyard project, and seeing all the possibilities that are happening inside the space itself. So I'll just add that to consideration.
All right, Councillor Newton.
Well, it's always great to have the library board come because you're always so enthused and you always have such innovative things going on at the library. So it's great. I love seeing it. My two questions are sort of unrelated. I was just curious on the library pickup that's still going on, if maybe this is a question for Director Bernard, if we have an idea about numbers for that. That's my first question. And the second question might be for another time, but I was just sort of curious as to the status of the backyard development project. It was sort of just kind of left, so I don't know where that is, and maybe council's going to get a different presentation on that. So thank you, and thank you for your enthusiasm, and thanks to you volunteers for all the hard work and low pay you get for your enthusiastic support of our library. Thank you.
Any Director Bernard or anybody want to respond on the backyard question or comment?
I don't have an answer for the backyard project at this time, but I'm happy to come back at another time and give you an update. And so far as the curbside holds pickup, that is obviously not as popular as it was when the doors were closed, but it continues to be popular, and I will bring specific numbers back next council meeting. Thank you.
All right. Council President Lube.
I wanted to say I have the honor of serving as the liaison to the library board, and I walk away from our meetings every month just optimistic and enthusiastic and just renewed and refreshed because of the optimism and the positivity and the way that these community members deeply care about our library board. So I just wanted to publicly thank all of them for everything that they do and the way that they serve their community. It's a really special thing to be a part of. No questions, because I get them answered monthly.
All right, we'll go to Councillor Goodhouse, then Youth Councillor Nog, then Councillor Shaw.
I was just going to jump in and say that the backyard playground looks exciting. I mean, that's a perfect place for something like that. I mean, you go to the library, everyone goes there, but just an activity place where there's not really a playground in the area. So that's going to be a perfect place for people to go there and enjoy, to have some fun. So that's exciting, and I look forward to that. And nothing else but thank you for everything you do and engaging with the community and always being relevant and fresh. That's really the important part, to always kind of be on, see what people need and adapt to what they need and want.
Youth Councillor Nog.
I definitely really love the cafe. I haven't had a chance to taste any of the pastries, but the coffee is amazing. I'd like to thank you guys for all the work you do. Thank you so much for partnering with Climate Champions also, and holding a story time and letting us help out to get a lot of our like environmentally friendly messages out. thank you for like always being a place where people can meet. I know that a lot of my friends love to go to the library, so it's a really good spot for a lot of people to go to, and it's a very like friendly spot. So thank you.
All right, Councillor Shaw.
Great, thank you so much, Mayor. I was just curious, perhaps a question for Dr. Bernard, going back to the funding question, not necessarily for perhaps city additional funding, but what about, you have such a beautiful space there, a beautiful entryway. Has there been, let's say, a community auction event where folks can donate, and perhaps you can have an auction to raise funds for the library? And you probably have all thought of this already, but it's something that I know works in a number of different communities.
Councillor Shaw, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Our Friends of the Library, another volunteer organization, regularly sells donated materials and deaccessioned materials in our lobby. So that's right next to the cafe. And that's another input source, a revenue source for us, because we use that funding to support our programming endeavors. We also used to have 2 big book sales. We called them big book sales in the Burgess Community Room, and they were very, very popular. Again, just think of piles and piles and piles of books and sorted by subject on different tables that you can just spend a day walking and looking through and purchasing, and all of those funds again go to library programming efforts. So we are obviously looking to perhaps restart one of our big book sales. That probably won't happen until later on this year, depending on what COVID chooses to do and the uncertainty of our lives right now, but we are looking at bringing that back. So thank you for mentioning that.
All right. Thank you, Library Board, and thank you, Director Bernard. Really appreciate all the efforts and energy that go into making our library a great place and help the people of Tigard thrive. So thank you.
Thank you.
And good night.
Good night.
We are going to move on to item number 6 on the agenda, which is a capital improvement plan update. City Engineer, are you with us?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm City Engineer Joe Wisniewski, and happy to be here this evening to share the latest update on all things CIP related. I'm going to get my presentation open here really quick. Okay, so once again, tonight we're going to cover the latest update for all things related to the CIP. We have 6 systems that we will cover, starting with parks. We'll go through all streets projects, water system, sanitary and stormwater, and then we'll conclude with facilities. As in the past, we will follow the red, yellow, and green light status on each project just to give a feel for where each project stands on schedule and on budget. So first I'll start with parks. We have a few projects taking place in Dirksen Nature Park. You will see that the schedule is slightly delayed, showing up as yellow. That's due to combining the wetland boardwalk and walkway project with the off-street parking lot. We were able to combine those 2 projects to take advantage of some contracting, some permitting benefits, and also the schedule slightly delayed because of weather impacts and delaying the project to start in the dry weather instead of earlier this spring when it wasn't feasible to start the work with wet weather. Both of those projects are expected to begin here within the next month, and we'll be proceeding shortly. The next one on the list is our Fennel Creek Trail our RFFA grant project. It's also known as the Fennel Creek Trail Connections Project. This one's been around for quite some time now and continues to show up as red. Lately, there's been a few issues that were identified as we were approaching the 90% plans with some utility coordination, some easement acquisitions, and then having to go through a few amendments with the ODOT contracts and the funding side of it. So we've worked through all those issues, and we now have a clear path forward to complete the project and get that out for bids. However, we're looking at least a 1.5 year delay. So it's very significant delay, but the positive is, if there is any light at the end of the tunnel, that we do have a clear direction forward with ODOT to get this project out for construction bidding. But that is looking to be about a year from this fall before we can get that out for the bidding phase.
So Joe, I just want to be clear, you don't mean it's going to be constructed then, you mean it's going to go out to bid then?
That is correct. And the key word that you may hear us talk about is obligation. Obligation is a federal term that refers to the point in time when the federal dollars are obligated to the project, basically locking them down for, committing them to the project from the feds. And that occurs at the time that we advertise the project for construction bidding. And then after that is when we move into the construction phase. Right now, the construction phase is going to depend on exactly when we can get this out for bid. And how that hits the wet weather windows for construction. But most likely we are looking at construction in 2024. That is out there a ways, but as everybody's well aware with this project, there's been a lot of moving pieces with it, a lot of coordination with various agencies, various funding sources, and we're getting closer, but it's definitely taking us a lot more time than we ever anticipated when this project initially began. I'm happy to answer any more questions on that now, or we can go through projects and I can take all questions at the end. It's up to council how you would like to handle that.
I think it'd be good to do it as we're moving through. So I think people should raise their hands if they've got questions. And Joe, you can just call on people if they're raising their hands, I would say, to keep it moving. Looks like Councillor Shaw's got a question.
Okay, Councillor Shaw.
More of a comment. You had mentioned the wetland boardwalk and walkway and that it was too wet to build the wetland boardwalk.
Yeah, so it's the boardwalk that's in the area of the wetland in Dirksen Nature Park. And just the construction activity with erosion control and high water, it was basically be detrimental to the wetland area to work during that time frame. So the project's been delayed till this May to begin, and so we're about a month away from starting that project now.
Thank you.
Okay, so some more parks projects. Council's well aware that we've completed the Park and Rec System Plan update this fiscal year, and we're now working towards the implementation plan. So the team will definitely be coming back to council here in the near future to talk more about that one. At our last council meeting, you heard from our friends in community development about Universal Plaza, and the contract was awarded at that time. So that project is progressing well. It did show up as yellow on here just because it is delayed a little bit from the original schedule, and also there's been some budget increases that you heard about previously. So that's why it's yellow at this time. Not that there's been any change or anything that from what you heard last week. The Red Rock Creek Trail Plan is a ODOT managed contract, but it's also being delivered by our community development group. Scoping is underway, and that project will be taking off soon. Sorry, I lost my place here. The Fennel Creek Trail Alignment Study, that was completed this fiscal year and has been published. And then we're also working on a couple projects in Cook Park, one being the accessible boat ramp, also the inclusive play structure. The proposals for that, for the play structure, are in the final review and selection phase right now. and hope to have an announcement out soon on the play structure. So moving into streets projects, we have the pavement management program. That's our annual program that we do all of our slurry seal through, a lot of the grind and inlay paving projects. That project is out for contractor bidding right now. And I show the budget and schedule as green because we're hopeful that everything's going to come in okay. But we, as you'll hear throughout the presentation tonight, there's a lot of supply chain issues, cost of doing business, labor shortages, things like that that are going to play into a lot of our bids coming up. The way we have our program structured, we can right size the work based on the bids that we receive. So overall, we'll stay under budget. It's just a matter if we can deliver the full amount of work that we anticipate for the year based on where bids come in. And that, like I said, that's advertised currently, so we'll know here within a few weeks how that one looks. The Pedestrian and Cyclists Connections Program, that's kind of a catch-all for a lot of different projects that we run. It could range from pedestrian and vehicle counts. Sometimes it's used for match dollars for other grant programs and other larger CIP projects. But overall, that program is well. It's actually under budget at this point, so we're looking at securing some more materials and things before this fiscal year is up that we can use towards additional projects next year. Durham Adaptive, that project is showing up as yellow, both budget and schedule, but that one is the new Hawk signal that's in front of Tigard High School. The latest on Energizing, the Hawk signal, and that one going live for traffic and for pedestrians. We're looking at about a 2 to 3 week delay right now, waiting for the utility to, what do I want to say here, energize the signal. So the electrical service was just inspected and approved, and we're waiting for PG to schedule their crews to actually give us electrical service there so that we can activate that signal. But there'll be plenty of announcements on that one. We've been working on some education pieces for the public, both for students and for motorists, on what to expect with that new signal. Mayor Snyder.
And that project's more than just that adaptive more than just that signal. I've been noticing, since I live in that general area and drive it a fair bit, there's been a lot of activity up and down the whole corridor. So when is the actual adaptive signal program going live, or has it gone live already?
So very good. What you're noticing right now is they're going around to all the various other signals that's part of the Durham Adaptive Project, which I believe is approximately 13 locations. Don't quote me on that. I can look up the numbers for you. But they're putting in all the final components so that all the signals can talk to each other and progress traffic all the way through the area. Our goal is to have that project wrapped up by this summer, but I don't have the final date in front of me right now on when it will all be fully live. Once all the componentry is in place, then they have to go through a testing phase and kind of fine tune all the sensors and everything to make it truly function. And that's what you're seeing right now is they're doing a lot of night work installing the devices, and then the technicians will be out there calibrating everything.
I think you might deserve a red in the schedule on that one. I don't know. I mean, it was planned to be done before I became mayor, and that was a long time ago.
Yes, I would agree with that one. We can, well, hopefully at our next CIP update, that project's wrapped up and we can put a bow on that project. But yes, that one is definitely should show up as red. So the next project listed on here is Roy Rogers Road. That project is essentially in their punch list phase. The county is leading that project. This project will be in our CIP for years ahead. We have an agreement with the county to pay our share over about 10 years. So all future reference to this project is in the CIP is just for payment to the county for the city's obligation on that project. 121st Avenue, this is a county-led MISTIP project. The schedule is delayed mostly due to easements and utility coordination issues, but that project is scheduled to go out for construction bidding here soon within the next couple months, and construction is expected for this summer. The North Dakota Bridge Replacement Project, this is another one that we could probably look at turning this one to schedule as red as well. We do have the notice to proceed finally issued by ODOT to our consultant. This is a federally funded bridge replacement project. They just started design, and at my next update, I will definitely be able to share more details on expected schedule for construction on that one. If you're in the area, you'll start noticing some survey crews out on the site. They're going to start doing their geotechnical work, all the early engineering tasks. But that project plays into the next one as well, the Tiger Street Bridge replacement. Both of these bridges are parallel to each other over the Fennel Creek Trail. And there's also the Hall Boulevard over 217 project. So these three bridge replacement projects are all either in design phase or nearing construction. And we're committed to only having one bridge or one street closed at any given time. So when I say the schedule is to be determined, it's going to be really between North Dakota and Tiger Street. The first one that is ready for construction will be the one that goes to construction first. And why that's a little up in the air right now, the Tiger Street Bridge project is funded all with City of Tigard funds. There's no state or federal aid on that project, which allows us to have a little bit more flexibility on delivering that project. The North Dakota Bridge, with it having ODOT leading the project and federal funds, we have to go through their process. It takes, basically you have to have some patience. It takes a little bit of effort to get those projects delivered, and the schedules take a little bit longer to define. So at this point, we're thinking the Tiger Street Bridge may be able to be delivered before North Dakota, even though North Dakota has technically started before Tiger Street. But because of the different funding source, it's giving us some flexibility. So more to come on that, but Tiger Street Bridge is out for consultant selection right now. North Dakota Bridge is in the early design phase, and the Hall Overpass is part of the 217 project. So that is already technically in construction phase, but the bridge itself has not been fully defined yet when that one will be closed as part of the ODOT project. So a lot of moving pieces with those three bridge replacements. And then the last streets project on the list here is Murdoch sidewalk and stormwater improvements. This one is in the design phase. We have a consultant on board now. They just started all their survey work and preliminary design as well. But this is a great project leading into the Templeton-Tuwalton school area, both for pedestrian safety and some stormwater improvements. And then we have another slide here, streets projects. The next one is the Bonita Sequoia intersection traffic signal. We just met with the county project management team. This is another MISTIP county-led project, and they expect to kick off design on that one in early FY23. So we just had a preliminary scoping meeting with them and make sure everybody has the goals and expectations in place for that project. So that'll be kicking off soon for design. The TSP was adopted this fiscal year, and the Fruing Street Sidewalk Infill project, it says it's under construction on our slides. At the time of putting this together, it was still in active construction. Right now, we're working through punch list items and essentially getting ready to close out that project. Highway 99W streetlights. This is another one that could maybe show up red because of the timing. But we also made some significant changes lately to the scope of work on that project, which reopened the schedule for it. So what the latest changes in the last few months here was that because of the ODOT paving project on 99W, ODOT is actually going to take over some of the lighting work at various intersections, incorporate that into their paving work or their preliminary work that they're doing, which that allowed us to free up some budget from the street lighting project that we're delivering. And we moved those funds to the Bull Mountain 99W intersection. We're going to add lighting there, and we're also adding some bike lane improvements to help with getting cyclists through the intersection. That project's at about 90% design now with those changes, and we hope to get it out for bidding yet this summer for construction into the summer and fall. The ADA right-of-way program is another annual program similar to the PMP program that we deliver every year. That project is also out for bids. So once we get the bids back in, we'll be able to report out, better update on how material prices are and what that's looking like for this year. But we have some concerns overall with anything that's out for bid right now, where it's going to come in for budget. But we'll right size the scope of work to make sure that we spend our money for this year and complete the work. It's just a matter of how many locations we can complete. The other two projects here is just two more annual programs. And then finally for streets is the Main Street Phase 2 project, which officially began this week for construction. Our project manager is on site daily, coordinating now with the business owners and the public for access. We have our campaigns out there that businesses are open. And we know that this project's going to be a significant impact to the downtown area, but as Phase 1 turned out to be really nice improvement for downtown, we're looking forward to Phase 2 as well. And we just hope everybody can work together really well on this project, and we'll keep everyone updated on that. I'm sure you've seen some of the communications come out. We have the website for the project set up right now, and if anyone that's interested for ongoing updates for that, I highly encourage them to sign up for our website email blast or whatever they push out. You'll be able to get those updates. So I'll cover some of the water projects next. Reservoir 18, we just recently announced the site selection for that project, so we're moving along well on that. It's probably going to be the largest CIP project in most recent history anyways, if not ever. I guess I would loosely say ever, because I don't know how far back we should look for that, but it's going to be a large project. Very, very excited now that we have the site selected, that they can move into final design, and we'll be back probably this summer, maybe early fall, with an update on the guaranteed maximum price and the contracting side of delivering the reservoir. Couple projects
Can you give us this? I mean, is that like a $30 million, $50 million, $100 million project? What is the scope of it?
So right now, just broad numbers, and we'll talk more definitely at the budget hearings coming up, because we added some contingency just to forecast fund balances and different things because the project is so large. But right now, I would say all in, we're forecasting about a $30 million project. And when I say all in, that's engineering, construction, design, all services to deliver the project.
Thank you.
We have a few completed projects listed here. And then we also have some smaller CIP work at various reservoirs and pump stations for replacement of generators. If anyone has questions on these projects, I can cover them in more detail, but just keeping an eye on time here, keep us moving along. Yeah, sanitary sewer projects, that's typically a smaller system in our CIP, mostly because the sanitary sewer is maintained and operated on the larger system anyways, the pump stations and the trunk lines by CWS. But we do have plans this coming year to update the sanitary sewer system plan. And also CWS just pushed out the East Basin system plan that covers the Tigard area. So with those two plans, you will see us start to incorporate additional projects into the sanitary sewer system in future CIP work. So about a year from now, when we're talking the next CIP development cycle, we'll have a few more projects to add. Stormwater projects, the Kruger Creek stabilization project, that's nearing 100% design right now and will be pushed out for contractor bidding, fingers crossed, within the next month. That's our goal right now. The Washington Square retrofit plan, we delayed that to fiscal year 23, mostly to take advantage of the Washington Square Regional Center plan that community development just completed. And then also it'll be aligned with the stormwater system plan update that we're going to start working on as well. And then Oak Street property, that project's been completed. That was removing a house near Fennel Creek Trail that we purchased the property, and will allow us to do future improvements of that area on Oak Street at the Fennel Creek. And then the Red Rock Creek stabilization project, design, it's in early design phase right now, but that project is going well. And then finally, facility projects. Council has heard from our Public Works Director recently, some status updates on the facility or the property selection process that we're going through. That's going to be ongoing and has been a little fun, to say the least, to try to find the right site, but that's still taking place. The staff work area is complete. Those were some improvements that we did about a year ago now, but it still shows up as an active project because we are waiting for some of the furnishings that have had some supply chain issues securing them. So the actual construction, the project itself is complete, but there's some materials that we're still waiting on. And then the library HVAC system, that was just approved by council at a previous supplemental, and our facilities group is working on that currently. So I believe that's the end of my slides. I can stop sharing my screen so that we can see each other, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions that you might have.
All right, Council, I think you were asking in between or during the presentation, but if you have any final follow-up, now would be a good time. Councillor Newton and Youth Councillor Nog.
Thank you for that thorough presentation. Some of the questions I had were answered by your presentation, so thank you very much. I just wanted to say that I'm really glad that the project on Murdoch Street is underway. That's kind of a dangerous route for kids that live close to get to school, so I'm really glad to see that. And I'm glad to see that we've got somebody on site on Main Street to help those businesses navigate that project. When we had Burnham Street project in the last Main Street, that having somebody on site every day made a difference. So, and then I had some thoughts on the Reservoir 18 site planning, but I think maybe our upcoming budget committee, when we talk about the CIP, would be an appropriate time to get into that. So thanks again for the thorough presentation.
You're welcome. Thanks for the comments.
All right, Youth Councillor Nog.
I was wondering if there was any consideration. I know that there has been some people asking about a sidewalk near Tigard High. I think it's on the intersection of Martha and 72nd. I was wondering if there has been any updates on that project.
Youth Councillor Nog, are you referring to, I think I know what you're referring to. Well, I guess I should verify. Are you meaning a sidewalk or a crossing at?
Crossing, sorry.
Okay, so City engineer, I know the answer too, because we've continued to communicate with the Tigard High School student that has questions about this, but go ahead. And there's good news is the short answer, but Joe, you want to share the details?
Yes, happy to. The location on Martha at Tigard High School is actually part of our ADA ramp improvement program this year. And that project is currently out for bidding. So as soon as the bids are in, we go through all the contract procurement steps. We'll have a contractor on board, and that one is one of our locations that will definitely be delivered regardless of how the bids come in. So we have a list of all the locations, and if for some reason come in high, that is not a location that I would recommend cutting. It's associated with the school. It has a lot of good reasons to make sure we complete that project.
Any other questions or comments for City Engineer? Thank you very much, and we'll move on to our next item on the agenda. Good to see you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
All right, so we're going to talk about City Council Board and Committee meetings. City Manager Reimer, I think you're going to do a little bit of a setup to this.
Yes, good evening again, Mayor and Councilors. Thanks to all of our presenters previous, all good items. Hopefully this one carries forward in the same manner. You've heard from both TVF&R and our library board today talking about coming out of COVID, and that's really what this is about, is looking at your city council meetings as well as our public board and committee meetings, of which there are approximately 12 other advisory groups that we have advising the council. So tonight we wanted to do is start a conversation, and myself and the city attorney think this is really two-part. Tonight, have the council talk about your expectations, maybe any additional questions you have, and then a follow-up meeting. We would come back with a format for your meetings that meets those needs. As I said, your expectations is important in this process. It's important to understand your expectations for future council meetings. We've learned a lot in the last 2 years. All of you have, all we have, and what do our meetings look like moving forward? As an example of that, Beaverton right now is testing, I'll use that word, 2 different formats. Their first meeting in a month is in person, and then their second meeting in a month, which is right now, and this month is virtual, like we're doing here. And so that's just one example of what other communities are doing to see what works best for them. We've laid out a series of questions in here just to hopefully help facilitate a conversation. As you might suspect, there's many different variables that we have to solve for, from what the state law is to what resources we have, what technology we have, and once again, what are your expectations? A couple key things that we think are important to talk about, what we've called the city safety standards. We all are aware that the regulations have been removed from the state level, though we think it's still important to be cognizant of different safety standards. In this case, 6-foot distancing, for example, at meetings. Would that apply to just the meeting attendees, meaning council, boards, and the team that's there? Should also apply to the public. And another important ingredient is public comment. By law, city council meetings, budget committee, planning commission must have public comment. We are suggesting that all of our meetings would have public comment. And that's important, I think, from who we are as a community, what we seek from our community, the input that we have, but also then leads to what type of technology do we need to have to comply with state law. And so the AIS has a series of background information as well in it. Shelby and I are both here to answer any questions you may have, as well as Mr. Nolap from a technology standpoint. So Mayor, I'm going to turn it back to you now, and we're happy to participate as needed in your conversation.
All right, thank you. And I don't usually speak first. I'm going to do so on this just briefly, partly because on a monthly basis, all the mayors are speaking about how they're conducting meetings and having discussions about what's working and not working. And I guess I also facilitate our meetings. So I want to just start with some of that and some of my observations and experience. If the council will indulge me in that just briefly, and part of this may end up being a little bit of a proposal, but certainly can be crafted and added on to or rejected by the council. I'm okay with that too. I think the first thing I will say, because I think there's some easy things that we can just sort of, I think, agree to related to this. And the first is that, and part of it is because it's now state law. The one good thing that I would say came out of COVID is dramatically more participation in public process and communication. We saw that at the legislature. We've all had the benefit of that, being able to testify for many more things than we would have otherwise. And that's not going to change, and I don't think it should change. So when we're talking in any discussion, in my mind, where we're talking about an in-person meeting, we are still going to have public comment that can be done virtually. My preference is that we start to work towards allowing public comment that includes video, very similar to how the state legislature's been taking testimony that way. You know, we pivoted to the phone quickly because it was easy, and Mr. Nolop figured out how to do it, and it's worked, I would say, okay, but I think for the long run, we need to be able to have video. I think what I just said about public input and public participation should apply to not just the council, but all of our public meetings where public comment is taken, whether it's required or not. I think that that is, in my mind, the new standard of what's acceptable, or the minimum standard as to what's acceptable, is to take testimony virtually from the public. And I think that's a access and an equity issue. It's so many things, all wrapped up in one. So that's one thing for all of you to think about. The other thing I want to say is that I firmly believe that our council meetings will flow better and be more productive if we avoid as many hybrid council participation meetings as possible, meaning either in person or virtual, but not both at the same time. I just watch, first of all, having facilitated all our meetings and then done that walkthrough with the technology and saw kind of what it would really look like. I think it's okay if there's a very occasional need, someone is sick, you know, someone is out of town for a week that was either unexpected or, you know, there's some crucial discussion that needs to happen. And if that's the case, then maybe we just have a virtual meeting altogether. I guess I don't want to dismiss it out of hand, but I think our standard should be one or the other. We're either doing a certain meeting virtually or we're doing it in person. And again, I'm always meaning that we're taking public testimony virtually. That's not what I'm meaning, but those are the things that I would just share as maybe discussion points to start with as we're working through some of this. I would extend typically the same request to staff if we're having an in-person meeting as well, or teammates that are providing some sort of a presentation to the council, either again virtual or in person. The safety standards, I think, as we're masks off and getting, you know, assuming that the COVID trajectory remains the same, I think we're going to need the public to be able to come to our meetings. And I don't know that we have space for, you know, permanent 6-foot distancing. And so I think we're going to need to think about that. People can choose to wear a mask if they want. But those are my thoughts. So Council President Lube, you've been very patient and had your hand up. Why don't you go?
To be honest, I forgot it was up. I think, you know, again, a lot of the things that have come out these last couple of years is our flexibility. And one of the things that I have had some insight into is my regular day job has been incredible as far as meeting people where they are and not forcing all of one or all of another situation on everybody. And I actually think that that is our benefit and a huge strength of, I don't know everyone on the council's situation, and I don't know, you know, when elections are up, we're looking at making it a more equitable place, and I don't want to make judgments on what's going to work best for people. And I understand from a facilitation and a flow perspective, it may be a little bit more difficult, but to me, I actually find it critical to provide the flexibility for people to be able to best decide for them how to participate. I think it's great when we're in person, but for certain situations, I think back on when I had my daughter not that long ago, I was able to fully participate the entire time because I was remote, and I had that. And it would have looked very, very different for me if we had to all be in the room at the same time. I just wouldn't have had the level of access and participation. So I just want to say that I think if we are truly looking at, hoping that the council reflects the community and providing opportunities to people, I think that's something that we seriously need to consider in order to even the playing field for participation. I completely agree as far as public comment moving to video. I think that would be great to be able to have, and that it should be at every meeting. That's just the kind of community we are. We want to hear from people to say. And I agree with safety standards. I think we have a responsibility to keep our team safe, each other safe, and the public safe. And so whatever we need to do. I will say that my belief that we should be flexible on allowing counselors to choose whether to be in person or virtual also extends to the staff. I know many of us, sometimes childcare or whatever falls through and kids are running around in the background, but they're still able to participate and be their full selves. And honestly, I think it's a little bit more fun when a dog is in the background or a baby. So I think that's great. I know one of the questions was that you didn't address, Mayor, was the same meeting schedule and whether we should reduce or go down. I find that when our meetings go long or they get really, really crammed in, it can be really difficult by the end of the evening to pay attention and to give everything what it needs if, a lot of us have day jobs, and so it becomes very long days. So I'm actually in favor of keeping them open, but being flexible and saying if we don't have enough business, like we don't need to meet for one item. So the flexibility to change the schedule around here and there, but not to pack things in and keep us here for long periods of time. I think I answered everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Goodhouse.
Thank you. I kind of agree, Mayor, with what you were saying a little bit. I mean, one thing with COVID is that this option has made it great for, we can all come together and meet and everything, but going back and starting to have some in-person meetings really makes such a huge difference to be in person, interact, be able to see everyone's faces, kind of get, either see what direction the conversation is going. You get those physical and social cues as far as which way the directions are going of the conversation, how it's interacting. So I kind of agree with you where there's been times when, just even before now or before, where if you have a conference, if you have a meeting and someone's on the phone, it seems like even though they have another source, that person almost gets ignored. It doesn't have the same engagement. So I would be for either all in person, or if something that doesn't work right, then we all be virtual. But I think doing the hybrid kind of mix might get a little more complicated. And I think part of it is, in a sense, the more we can and more often we can, it's kind of our duty to be elected officials, is to be there and present and be there for our community. I do agree, and I like the option that the community can call in different formats. I think that's a great way for people to either call in by phone or call in by video and give testimony. I think that's important, and I think that's one of the big things that came from COVID is that ability for us to give more options. But I really think more gets done when we're there in person, as many that can be. And I think the same thing with the committees. Our committees, when they're in person, they can feed off each other a lot more. They can talk, a lot more ideas can come together. Safety, I mean, yes, keep the safety going. I wonder if that still means we're going to keep up the dividers there in City Hall or not. But yeah, anything we can still to keep everyone safe, ourselves, the public and staff, keep up on those. The schedule, I agree the same thing. I think keep the schedule the same way. And I agree with Council President Lube that if something were, there's one item, it's going to maybe be a 20-minute council meeting, then see if we can put on to another meeting. But I'd like the way we still do it, where there's at least the option for 4 meetings a month, and that 5th one we're off no matter what. And one thing I think we kind of went off a little bit through COVID. We used to before kind of look at people's schedule going forward and see if there was a conference coming up where a bunch of us are going to a conference, or see what the summer schedule is to see if we're all taking a vacation around a certain time to kind of plan meetings. And so I think we cycled that back in. That will help too with meetings, knowing in advance, where a couple of months in advance we put in where, you know, there's a conference coming up that maybe half of us might be going to, or if there's we're going on vacation or something's coming up, it'd be good to check back in with us so we don't have that, you know, kind of some are attending, some are not. I think that was all the questions.
Okay, I just want to challenge the comment about, or the observation that, you know, part of our duty is to be present, and that means being physically present. On some level, I guess I agree with that, but I don't think that's the only way you can be present and useful to the community. And so I just want to point out that I think you can do your work differently and still be present for the community, even if you're physically not in your space at that moment in time. Let's see, Councillor Newton, you want to go?
Sure, thank you. So, Mr. Mayor, a couple of questions just for clarification on your proposal. Were you thinking that all public testimony would switch to virtual? So if we were in person, would people, well, I was a little confused about that. So if you could clarify that.
Yeah, sorry. We would allow it both in person and virtually. I just don't think we have we don't have an option to not take it virtually unless it's a group that doesn't, not the council, but if it's a group that doesn't normally take public testimony, they should probably reevaluate whether taking it virtually may make sense. But I'm not suggesting we start taking testimony at groups that, or committees that haven't traditionally done that.
Right, and you're not suggesting that if we're meeting in person, people could come in and testify, correct?
No, they could. They could either come in person.
Yeah,
they could either come in person or testify virtually.
Got it. Okay, and then you answered my question about boards and committees. I was thinking about what Council President Lube was saying about the ability for people to have access if, you know, participating virtually is easier for them just because of their life circumstance. And so if folks are, so I think a hybrid is fine. If folks think that would be difficult, maybe alternating, as you were suggesting, Mr. Mayor. So that way the people who virtual is more convenient for, they're not having to come in for every meeting. So I would think about that too. But ideally, you know, if we could have flexibility. In terms of staff, I guess I would leave that up to the city manager. If he feels like, I don't have problems with them participating virtually, but there may be a situation where City Manager Reimer feels that it's important for the particular team to be here in person. If we're meeting in person, then I would leave that up to the city manager and that group. With regard to meetings, I like, and I just reserve every Tuesday, but the 5th Tuesday for council. And I think, Mr. Mayor, you do a good job with, along with the city manager, of looking at our agendas and try to give us as much of a heads up as you can if we're not going to be meeting. But I start to, you know, fade if we get much past 10 o'clock. So I think it's important that, and I feel bad for the team that does all the work to present for us if we're not at our best. So, and then in terms of the masking and 6-foot distancing, you know, I think it's important to protect folks. And so, you know, masks optional if that works, and whatever we need to do to keep folks safe is fine with me. So I think I answered all the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. I will just interject a little bit there related to teammates presenting. You know, it was very common, and Councillor Newton, you were one of the staff who had a lot of interactions with the public in the course of a public meeting. And that was pretty common, actually, that staff would take, and it was lots of different people that would take folks out into the hallway to have discussions about community development issues, et cetera. So I guess I just, in this whole course of figuring this out, that's something the city manager and team are going to need to think about too, because my expectation is that we would still be able to deliver on that.
That's a really good point, Mr. Mayor. And I think sometimes, I mean, some of the folks will know if it's a pretty big issue, what kind of, response we're getting from the public. And so, yeah, I think you raised a really good point. There were a lot of things that got addressed in the hall while the council was meeting. So I appreciate that comment.
Councillor Shaw and then Youth Councillor Nog.
Thank you, Mayor. I too believe that during the last 2 years, what we've learned is that flexibility is key. We've heard more from our community members than prior. I also know just a lot of emails that I've received, people have said, I was able to watch your council meeting at night at home, whether I was taking care of my kids, whether I was actually working out on the treadmill or having dinner, but they participated more than they had prior. And so I would recommend that we move forward with the hybrid flexible model. It may be technology challenging, but we have the technology, and I really respect Mayor. You've done a phenomenal job during this hybrid, but also virtual world of conducting these meetings. And I have every faith you can continue to do so. And so I would advocate that we have a hybrid flexible model. I think it would be very difficult schedule-wise if we did a couple weeks on, a couple weeks off, either in person or hybrid. I think it'd be very confusing. We'll confuse ourselves, we'll confuse our community members, there'll be complaints, and I would like to take that one off the table. As far as the same meeting schedule, I think our cadence, the amount it's doable. I listen to some of my colleagues who go until midnight because they meet maybe just a couple of times a month. And again, I don't think that would do any of us any service for either that night or the next day in our real jobs and day jobs and any other jobs you may have. And I think I've answered all the questions. So turn it over to Youth Councillor Nog.
This conversation mildly gives me like flashbacks from when we had this discussion with school. One thing about hybrid that was a positive but also slightly like inconvenient was there was a lot of like technical difficulties, and I know that's something that could be avoided, but there were oftentimes these like really long pauses, and I know it was a little bit difficult having serious conversations in a situation like that, but I know that we could make it work. Personally, I really like the idea of switching back and forth and having that flexibility of having the meeting be virtual one week and then it being in person the other week. It would also give people the time to get tested if they did have exposure to COVID, which might be something to look out for, especially with the cases rising in Oregon. But that was just something that I thought about. Having public comment be open as well, that's great. It'll make things really accessible. But I'm open. I'm excited to look forward to seeing people in person as well.
Thank you, Youth Councillor Nog. Council President Lube.
I just realized I forgot to address boards and commissions, and I've heard individuals where I think there are still people who have health concerns or just for whatever reason would like the option to be able to participate from home. And so if we can figure out a way to accommodate them, that would be my preference of hybrid meetings.
I think the boards and commissions, we should other than sort of requiring the testimony part, I actually think we should give them the freedom to figure out what works well for them and not force them into one way or another. I'd like to empower them to make their decisions. The requirements will have to be that they're safe. Whatever their plan is has to be safe. And it has to, if they take public testimony, it will have to include virtual access to public testimony, preferably video, in my mind. Those are sort of the basics of it. But beyond that, I think they should each be having their conversations kind of like we're having now. People supportive of that generally? I look like I had a lot of head shakes. Okay. All right, well, City Manager Reimer, you've got at least some direction there. I'm not sure we've got super great consensus on some of the other points. I was also thinking about maybe a model where, you know, the default's in person until someone says they're not going to be there, and then we would just go to all virtual for that meeting. That I think's maybe worthy of some consideration. I would hope that wouldn't mean every meeting would be that way, but I guess that could be what that meant. So just things to think about. But City Manager Reimer, did you feel like you heard strong consensus on some of the more sticky things? Because I'm not sure I did exactly.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say I heard consensus on everything. Obviously, safety standards, the public comment at all different boards, committees, making sure that we can move towards video public comment opportunities as well. I think where I heard a variety of opinions is around providing hybrid or not. I think my notes probably show maybe a lean towards having hybrid opportunity for the council. And I think those were some of the key pieces. I'll ask our city attorney as well if she wants to jump on. One thing we didn't, I don't know if we brought it up in the AIS or not, but start time as well was something. If 6:30 should remain the start time, is a 6 o'clock start time like other communities are doing. Is there any preference there? Leave as is, look at another start time would be another question we'd pose as well. So.
Well, I think, I mean, City Manager Reimer, just to give you a little bit more context, we used to have a workshop session in person for an hour before the council meeting started at 7:30, and I actually thought that provided better sort of transition and also allowed for some topics that weren't really didn't warrant a bunch. I mean, they were open to the public, but they were not necessarily conducted on video and TV, and I actually think there's value in that too. We haven't really talked about that, but you know, some of the discussions and things that we spend time now on television with, I just, that is a question for me too. I think some of those are better handled in a different environment. So as far as the timing, I don't think we start formal meetings before 6:30 in my mind. I can barely make that work much of the time. When we were starting at 6:30 in person, the city was providing dinner, and we would cruise in whenever we could from wherever we were in person and arrive anywhere between 5:45 and 6:20 or 6:25, and that was just the reality of life before the pandemic. I don't think that's going to change. I would be curious if other people feel like they could really commit to constantly being available and have already eaten, or I guess that we need to revisit if we're having in-person meetings. Are we going back to meals, etc.? I thought that was an important time where the council did some relationship development too, and that's been pretty different too during the pandemic. So, Councilor Goodhouse, go ahead.
I was going to say this. Thank you, Mayor, for bringing that up, because that was also, I was thinking about that the other day, but that kind of just slipped my mind. We're kind of through the time warp of COVID with how much we really kind of relationship building between councilors and mayor and staff before that time, coming in, maybe 15, 20 minutes before, having a meal. And then just a lot of the workshops we did, a lot of the things that we did, we got a lot of good work done. We got a lot of different topics we discussed. We could even do our liaison reports, or things we've kind of not done lately at all too. So there's a lot of things that really brought us together, kept us informed, and kept us on top of everything. That in-person part is hard to replace. So I'm glad you brought that up, and I agree. 6:30. I think sometimes meetings we go to, or whether at work or even just scheduled meetings, run up against that time. So keeping it at 6:30. But going back to, I think, the same format we had before. Everyone here, I think, except for Councilor Shaw, has really experienced that format of meeting before, doing the workshops. Sometimes we went from 6:30 to 7:30 doing different workshops or having communications. And I think that was just a great way to keep that model going.
All right, Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Goodhouse, for recognizing I wasn't here then. One other option that I'd like to throw into the ring, City Manager Reimer, perhaps one more option, is we could do similar to the workshop of the budget that is happening this Saturday. And I apologize, I have a memorial to go to, so I will not be attending, but I've done a lot of pre-work, is to hold workshops separately. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be before every hybrid council meeting, or even perhaps there's options of, once the last Tuesday of every month, there's potential for an in-person workshop. Because again, like agendas ebb and flow, I'm sure there before every meeting, a workshop wasn't necessary either. And it would be difficult and challenging. I'm sure we'd all be running in at different times, whether a meal is provided or not. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Newton.
Well, I'm going to go back into the history here, and we used to have the third meeting of the third Tuesday of the month was a full workshop, but then it got to the point where staff needed business to be conducted, and there was a time constraint, and so we started having these sort of mixed meetings, workshop and business meetings, and so it sort of developed that we would have workshop topics and then business topics on the same meeting. I think the value of the 6:30 to 7:30 in the Red Rock Creek Conference Room, I remember Mayor Snyder would be able to give us reports about what was going on with the act. I don't remember what that stands for, but it's the Highway Committee, or some issue that he wanted to get feedback on us, a letter that he thought we should sign, or so sometimes we could use those for exec sessions. And quite frankly, most people were fresher between 6:30 and 7:30 than after the business meeting concluded at 9. So there would be workshop topics during that 6:30 to 7:30, but it was used for a lot of other types of things as well. And so I think that's a good thing to consider bringing back. The meal, most people participated in that. It was a good sort of informal way to connect. And so I think if folks are up for doing that, that would be great. I know y'all think I can make earlier times because I'm retired, but 6:30 is about as early as I can get there too. So I would support keeping the meeting starting at 6:30. So thanks.
I will add, Councillor Newton, to what you just said, that I actually think that our executive sessions and the current way we're doing that at the end of the meetings is actually really dysfunctional, or very poor choice of the way that we're doing or have been handling those. I think we, as a council, just in general, we're much fresher and more energized and frankly, more engaged when those discussions happened before. That went away during the pandemic because we were starting the live meeting at 6:30. But that, that is I think is also a big loss to the way we had functioned. I think starting most of our executive sessions after 8:30 or 9 p.m. is just not ideal. And that's what's happened for the last 2 years, basically. So City Manager Reimer, I don't know that you got much consensus on this situation here right now. And I don't know if we all need to think about it a little bit more, or maybe come up with a proposal, but maybe I'm not reading the room well. Maybe I'm off base.
So I would suggest that City Attorney and I go back in a debrief after this, come up with an option or two that takes into consideration all the different things that we need to pay attention to for you, including posting requirements, etc. Come back with a plan that the council can discuss. I think this last 5 minutes has been really helpful. I did have a chance to spend some time with our city recorder and understand how meetings were held. I too, like Councilor Shaw, have not been part of those yet. And so we walked through, probably the third time she's walked through it with me. What's a study session? What's a workshop? And so I now have it on a piece of paper, but we'll come back with some options for that too. Because we've talked about workshops as an example. That seems maybe an appropriate time where the council does come together in a workshop type setting and in more informal where you can spend that time and build the relationships and have those conversations with the team. But Shelby and I will talk through these. We'll talk with the leadership team, Mike Nolip and others, and then we will return. One thing I did not mention, because of all the different complexities, we're recommending right now we look towards that first meeting in June to implement. So we'll keep building off of this and make sure that we return in short order, so the council can agree a couple weeks at least in advance of how we move forward. So if that's satisfactory to you and the counselors, that's what I would recommend.
That's fine with me. Everybody live with that? All right.
Thank you for this conversation.
Okay, and with that, I will hand the meeting off, I think, for the next agenda item, considering resolution adopting charter interpretation of consecutive years. The next two items on the agenda, actually, I'm going to hand off to Council President Lube to facilitate.
Thank you, Mayor Snyder. And I believe we have City Attorney Rahala here to present.
Good evening, Council. So the first part of this agenda item is the resolution that adopts the interpretation that Council discussed last meeting. So the interpretation is that consecutive years means successive calendar years, and that there is a 2-year break in service required in order to reset what is a consecutive year. So the first action before you tonight is to adopt that interpretation, which reflects your conversation from last meeting.
Thank you, City Attorney. I want to open it up if anybody has any questions on the resolution. City Attorney, I just want to confirm there was an original version, and then there's the version that's posted to the agenda that is the updated version, and that's good to go?
Correct. Yes, the updated version that's posted in the packet and online is the one for approval tonight.
Perfect. Thank you. Councilor Newton?
Yeah, City Attorney Rahala, there's also a section 3 that interprets the statement that these limitations do not apply to the filling of an unexpired term, to apply to the filing all vacancies, regardless of whether the vacancy was filled by election or appointment. And that's also, I just wanted to make sure.
Apologies. Yeah, I missed the last section. You're correct. That is part of the resolution.
Councilor Goodhouse?
Yes, thank you. City Attorney Rahala, just to clarify on too, because I think you gave some clarification on that. So it's just a 2-year break in service until the next regular election cycle, right?
So 2-year break in service will always be the next regular election cycle. So we took that language out of what has been originally published because we felt that added confusion to it. Because if it's less than 2 years, it's going to be a special election. And then the section 3 is going to kick in because it will be filling a vacancy. So a regular election is always going to be a 2-year break in service.
Okay, and so it's service. So I just want to clarify, because what would happen is if someone stopped, they would file about 1.5 years later, but it would be the service. They'd have to actually be elected until they're in. So they can file within that 2-year period, because then that would be, they'd file, be elected, and then when they would be sworn in to serve would be 2 years. That's one thing I want to make sure, because is if someone falls off a council and they wait to the next cycle, but actually filing for that would actually be about 1.5 years later, which would be less than the 2 years. So I want to make sure there's no confusion in that aspect of someone filing and running would be less than 2 years, but then it would actually, once they get sworn in, would be a 2-year gap.
Right. So the language in the charter and the language in this resolution focuses on term of service, because whether somebody files is irrelevant. They could not win the election. Okay. So this is only focusing on the time actually in office.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any additional questions or a motion?
All my questions have been answered. Everybody else's questions been answered. I think this reflects what we discussed at our meeting, and so I'm going to move to approve resolution 22-8.
Councilor Shaw?
Oh, I was going to second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, will the city recorder please read the number and title of the resolution?
Resolution number 22-08, a resolution interpreting Tigard Charter Chapter 3, Section 7 regarding consecutive years.
Will the city conductor please conduct a roll call vote? Youth Councilor Nog will not provide an advisory vote tonight.
Council President Lube,
Yes.
Councillor Shaw,
Yes.
Councillor Goodhouse,
Yes.
Councillor Newton,
Yes.
Mayor Snyder.
Resolution number 22-08 is adopted by a vote of 4 yeses and 1 abstention. Vote of the council. Thank you, everyone. We now need to discuss the second part of this, the eligibility to run for election for a partial term. And before we have some discussion, I believe Councillor Goodhouse, you wanted to speak first?
Yes, and on this portion, I'll recuse myself from this portion.
Okay, thank you. City Attorney?
Thank you. So the second item is the eligibility to run for a partial term of office. So the question before council on this item is under the charter term limits, if somebody has served for 10 years and they have 2 years remaining under the term limits, if they could then run for election, given the terms in Tigard are 4-year terms. So I've provided council with a memo that has the relevant legal citations in it. So you have a copy of a 2014 Attorney General opinion. The Attorney General opinion references a case, similar case law and statutes, as well as the city charter language applicable to this question. So the request before council tonight is basically to, by motion, affirm that legal precedent and that the reasoning adopted in the 2014 Attorney General opinion applies in this case. So council, as the memo says, council does have the authority to determine the final qualifications of its members, but we do believe that there's pretty clear case law on answering this question. So we don't feel that it's an ambiguous section of the charter that council would be interpreting. Rather, the item for council tonight would be affirming the applicability of the existing case law to this question. So we would ask for a motion to clarify that the existing case law does apply here. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, City Attorney Rahala. I found the memo and the actual legal opinion itself an interesting read, and I didn't have any questions, but Councillor Shaw or Councillor Newton, do you have any questions?
I did not. Thank you, Council President Lube.
I don't have any questions. I understand the opinion and thank the city attorney for bringing it forward. A little comment, I think, given the way our charter works, it does put, it's a little bit unfair to folks that are on a certain cycle. And so I'm hoping that we can take a lot of things before a charter review commission, but just have our charter review commission take a look at this because it seems inherently unfair. Although I do understand the opinion, and I appreciate the city attorney bringing it forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. I agree. I think the situation that we're in just continues to prove the importance of the charter review and really looking at these different topics and ensuring that our charter effectively serves the Tigard community. Are there any other comments or questions? Councillor Shaw?
I was just going to also affirm, I agree that it's inherently unfair that the way the system was set up. I don't think that was the intent. And I too think a charter could do wonders having a different interpretation moving that forward for fair and equitable future for those in Tigard.
With
I'm-
that, oh, thank you.
Is I'm happy to make a motion if it's a good time to do so.
I believe it is.
Thank you, Council President Lube. I move to affirm that the reasoning in the 2014 Attorney General's opinion applies to the Tigard City Council.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, will the city recorder please conduct a roll call vote? Youth Councilor Nog will not provide an advisory vote.
Council President Lube,
Yes.
Councillor Shaw,
Yes.
Mayor Snyder, Councillor Goodhouse,
The motion is adopted by a
Councillor
vote.
Newton.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, one more, Councillor Newton.
Yes.
Thank you.
The motion is adopted by a vote of 3 yeses and 2 abstentions of the council. Thank you all for your participation, and I apologize, Councillor Newton, for interrupting. Thank you, City Attorney Rahala, and I will turn the meeting over to Mayor Snyder.
All right, we have no non-agenda items. Item number 10 on the agenda is administrative reports. City Manager Reimer.
Thank you, Mayor and councilors. Tonight is all about the library. We've had a great conversation already with the library board. Just a quick follow-up on the library backyard project. Great public engagement and on that. What we'll be doing, that project will be included in the list of future park projects in the prioritization process that the team is leading. That will be considered during that process as well, which then the funding to follow. So more to come later this year on the library backyard, as well as many of our park projects. Just a couple other things. The first ID event that we've talked about will be happening tomorrow. And so this is a great partnership with our police department, with the library, Just Compassion, and the 2022 leadership cohort. And so just another great example of Tigard coming together. To my understanding, this is the first one in the area that hopefully others can then replicate as this important service is provided to other communities. So kudos to everyone involved in that, and we will share the results, if you will, with all of you to let you know how the attendance was at that event. We have had over 1,200 Tigard kids and teens and adults participate in library programs during the month of March. So as you heard, the involvement of our community continues to increase at the library. And so just some key facts as we try to share some of the data with all of you. And just a non-library item, though the library is part of this, just a reminder, on Saturday we have our budget committee. So for the community as well, we'll be starting at 9 a.m. It'll be in a remote environment this year. Hopefully next year we'll be in person having the conversation. 9 a.m. We'll have an extended break at lunch. So many of you, if not all of you, can attend the volunteer event, as well as some of the other budget committee members. And then we'll reconvene in the early afternoon for an additional couple hours. This will be the chance to really share the proposed budget with all of you and start the dialogue that's so important to the ultimate adoption of the document in a couple months. So that concludes my comments, and thanks again for all of your direction and leadership this evening.
Councillor Newton, you have a question or a comment?
I do. I wasn't able to make the egg hunt, so I was wondering how many folks turned out. I had something else going on, so I just wondered how. I'm sure it was a great success. I saw the pictures that Council President Lube posted, but I just wondered if we had a sense of how many folks turned out. Thanks.
I think it was maxed out at 75 children per group, and then the adults and family members with them. So I think it was full in every category.
Yeah, it was a great event. The weather was great. The sun was shining. All of our partner organizations that were there. So plus soccer happening around it. So parking near the event was getting tight by the end. So it was great.
All right. Anything further? Otherwise, is there a motion for adjournment?
I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. City Recorder, roll call vote, please.
Council President Lube,
Yes.
Councillor Shaw,
Yes.
Mayor Snyder,
Yes.
Councillor Goodhouse,
Yes.
and Councillor Newton.
Yes.
All right, we are adjourned. Good night, Tigard.
Night.